Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. Thank you for joining us today for our Vertical Insight Symposium on Hotels and Lodging, sponsored by HID Global. My name is Courtney Kay, and I am a manager of industry relations at the Security Industry Association. The Security Industry Association is the leading trade association for physical security technology businesses with more than 1,600 corporate members. In the welcoming slideshow, you should have seen some of our upcoming events, the most imminent to include ISC West from March 23rd to 27th in Las Vegas. We hope you can join us and stop by at our booth 8089. You can learn more about these events and register at securityindustry.org. And if you're not a member of SIA yet, please check out securityindustry.org/join to explore the benefits of membership. Before we begin, just a few housekeeping items. The session is being recorded and the session will be posted to our event webinar archives page. So if you miss anything or want to share the event, you'll be able to do so. And please submit your questions using the Q&A feature because we'll have a dedicated Q&A time after each speaker's presentation. And before we get started, I just want to make sure to thank our sponsor again, HID Global. Now you're all here today because lodging properties and casinos remain attractive targets for malicious actors, both physically and in the cyber realm. Our experts today will examine how integrated physical security and cybersecurity solutions can help mitigate threats and risks while supporting business objectives. Our first speaker, Eric Antons, will be discussing the full layered portfolio of security controls and why it's necessary to safeguard guests, associates, property, information, and processes in the hospitality sector. Second, today we'll hear from Phil Coppola, who will be discussing the advancement of mobile access control technologies in lodging and casinos. And then finally, our last speaker will be Eddie Collier, who will be presenting on emerging technologies in the casino space and LiDAR for business analytics. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Eric Antons. Eric is the Managing Vice President and Chief Safety and Security Officer at Marriott International, where he leads the physical and technical safety and security risk and crisis management, investigations, intelligence, executive protection, and governance programs. He is a busy guy. Previously, Antons was the Chief Security Officer at PPG Industries, Whirlpool Corporation, and Hyatt Hotels. Prior to joining Hyatt, Eric was the manager of international security and executive services with Sempra Energy. Eric began his security risk management career as a special agent with the Diplomatic Security Service and is a CPP, PSP, and certified lodging security director with the American Hotel and Lodging Education Institute. He's a board member of the International Security Management Association and the Security Foundation, and is a former board member of the Overseas Security Advisory Council. He is a veteran infantryman of the Army National Guard and speaks Spanish. Eric, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Courtney. Appreciate it. Okay, now let's see if I can pull this up and do it correctly. Can you see my slide?
Yes, we can.
Wonderful. Off to a great start. Well, good morning, afternoon, evening, depending on where you're dialing in from. I realize the title of this presentation might be a bit cavalier, but by the end of the next 30 minutes or so, I hope to convince you that no sector is really more open, more global, or more symbolically targeted than hospitality. It's really because hospitality is built upon access, being welcoming, and it also has to have a global reach. But those same qualities create an extraordinary risk surface that spans cultures, jurisdictions, and threat types. So in the next few minutes, I'm going to walk you through what makes securing hotels uniquely challenging, how we scale safety and security across our nearly 10,000 properties worldwide, and how intelligence, data, partnerships, and crisis discipline transform risk into resilience. Okay, did it advance to the second slide okay, Courtney?
Oh, we can see you moving.
You see the slide change then?
Yes, we can.
Okay, perfect. Okay, great. Smooth sailing here on out. Security programs often look similar on paper, but the execution is really what separates the varsity from the JV. First, a really quick primer on corporate security programs, at least mature programs that are out there across the private sector. Most global security programs include the same core functions: operations, intelligence, investigations, crisis management, business resilience, and physical security design. That structure really is industry agnostic. And if you look at any large organization and a mature program within that organization, you're going to see these core elements here in the middle. It really looks the same whether you're in tech, retail, manufacturing, energy, or hospitality. I've worked in the public sector and the private sector, energy, hospitality, manufacturing, and quite honestly, it's the same elements in the portfolio. And right in the middle, those are those elements of the portfolio. Now, our closest collaborators, our stakeholders, are on the periphery. So most threats are human-centered. So human resources is a very, very close collaborator. Legal and compliance departments sort of keep us operating within the legal and ethical guardrails of our organizations. Corporate communications, if something bad happens, chances are it's going to make the press or social media or both. So they're often very, very involved with us. They're also very good with crisis communications. And then insurance or claims or risk management, they tend to look at risk through a lens of risk management, very similar to us. So I would say if I had four really close collaborators, those would be our closest partners. Reporting lines vary. Sometimes it's legal, sometimes it's HR, sometimes it's operations, but the responsibilities are really consistent. So in my time in the private sector, I've reported through HR, finance, operations, and legal. It really depends on the industry. I currently report through both finance and legal. Our leveling within the organizations is usually CEO -2. So we report to senior leadership team members who then report to the CEO. So I report to our chief legal officer and our chief financial officer. Kind of unique, I get it, two bosses, but so far it's working pretty well. It certainly gives us an elevated stature within the organization and gives us incredible access and credibility. I really think the modern CSO these days is a generalist. So they're pretty good at a lot of different things. And ideally, they can bridge public sector experience with private sector scale. And this is really the foundation we start with before we start layering in the distinct realities of hospitality. So in hospitality, the business model itself is our greatest asset, but it's also our greatest vulnerability. As I mentioned before, hotels are designed for access. Lobbies, just think about walking into a large full-service hotel. What do they have? Lobbies, restaurants, bars, maybe a convention center, pools, rooftops. They're all intentionally open to the public. We host overnight guests, which means continuous anonymity and 24/7 activity. For this reason, people do things in hotels they would never do at home. Just think about it. Drug deals, drug overdoses, murder, prostitution, suicides, human trafficking. If you hear of something like a celebrity doing something bad in the news, chances are it's while they're traveling and it's probably in a hotel. Our properties become symbols of luxury, Western presence, economic influence, and high-value gatherings. We're also located or co-located in close proximity to other attractive targets like embassies, shopping centers, tourist attractions, and mass transit. We have VIPs, celebrities, and government delegations. These are all high-profile events which bring added complexity. And our workforce is enormous and diverse, creating natural insider risk considerations. So if you think about a 1,000-room full-service hotel, which is a big hotel, but not terribly uncommon, there might be as many as 250 to 300 associates working at that hotel. And a lot of these positions are low pay, low skill, which brings added dimensions of complexity and risk. All of this in an environment where alcohol, nightlife, and third-party events are constant. You can imagine the risk. It really ranges from crime to human trafficking and everything in between. So our mission is to be strong where it matters, subtle where it counts, and always preserving the guest experience. In the lower right-hand corner, this is our brand flag. We have 38 brands. So if you just even consider threat monitoring, there are a number of platforms which do this for us. Just having those platforms scan on a regular basis 38 different names, you can imagine the noise that can come in as a result of that. So not your typical product to secure. When global disruption hits, hotels feel it first, and they oftentimes feel it the worst, the hardest. So if you reflect back at COVID, the first industries really to flatline in the face of COVID were cruise lines, airlines, and hotels. They're incredibly cyclical businesses, and they're highly sensitive to global disruption. Like I said, when the pandemic hit, geopolitical tensions maybe spike or sanctions strike. When supply chains wobble, hospitality feels it immediately. Hotels can't relocate during instability. A property in a conflict zone stays in that zone. And because we're woven into local infrastructure, everything from fuel shortages to refugee flows can affect our operations. The good news is that hospitality is also among the quickest industries to rebound. And that resilience informs our approach to risk. So just think about what's going on in the Mideast right now. People aren't traveling. Groups are canceling their bookings. We're starting to see a lot of large events where they're considering either postponing or canceling those events. That means tourists aren't going to come in and stay at our hotels. So we're really taking it on the chin right now. Scale is our strength if we can make it consistent. So like I said, Marriott oversees nearly 10,000 properties. We're across 168 countries and territories. We have about 1.9 million guest rooms, and we're supported by hundreds of thousands of associates. And that means different cultures, languages, legal systems, and expectations. But we have to provide one standard of care. Our biggest challenge is creating a security program that scales responsibly while optimizing the guest experience. Growth expands the surface area, but standardization, intelligence, and training keep the risk per property steady, or at best, or ideally, trending downward. This image on the right is just a snapshot of our properties around the world that are either currently open or are due to open in the next couple of years. So this is really a pretty wide surface area that we have to contend with. I would be remiss if I at least didn't address terrorism, because when it does occur, of course, it's at the top of the headlines. And unfortunately, we have a long history with it. If you look at the last 25 years of global terrorism, hotels appear again and again. So from Sri Lanka to Tunisia, Mali to India, attacks against hotels have been persistent and devastating. They've included coordinated bombings, small arms attacks, sieges, vehicle-borne explosives. So between 2016 and 2026, Dow Jones tracked at least 232 attacks or plots targeting tourism and hospitality. That's what this image is on the right. So attacks in red, plots in blue. That history shapes our threat taxonomy, our baseline standards, and our vigilance. The threat is real, it's persistent, and it's geographically dispersed. And as you know, terrorism doesn't care about borders, brands, or business models. The headlines remind us attackers strike across continents, ideologies, and methods. Hotel attacks have resulted in hundreds of casualties and attacks, and attackers have used everything from suicide bombings to armed assault. So kind of a worst hits of attacks, at least up until about 2019, starting in the upper left-hand corner. Easter Sunday, 2019, 269 people killed, 500 plus injured, in coordinated attacks at the Shangri-La, Cinnamon Grand, and Kingsbury hotels in Sri Lanka. To the right, June 26, 2015, 38 killed, 39 injured at the Rio Imperial Marhaba Beach Hotel in Sousse, Tunisia. November 10, 2015, 22 killed, 7 wounded, the Radisson Blu Bamako, Mali. November 26, 2008, 175 killed, 300 plus injured at the Taj Mahal Palace Hotel, Mumbai. If you've ever seen the movie Hotel Mumbai on Netflix, that is an accounting of this incident. August 5th, 2003, 13 killed, 150 injured at the JW Jakarta. And then on July 17, 2009, 9 killed, 53 injured combined at that same hotel in the Ritz-Carlton. September 20, 2008, 55 killed, 266 injured at the Marriott Hotel in Islamabad. If you've ever seen Zero Dark 30, that account is in the film. And November 9, 2005, 60 killed, 115 injured at the Grand Hyatt, Radisson, and Days Inn hotels in Amman, Jordan. So our goal here is to disrupt the attack cycle as best we can, make reconnaissance difficult, execution harder, and recovery faster. And this requires layered defenses, adaptable posture, and continuous intelligence. If our global safety and security program were a spaceship, our threat condition program would be our primary engine. So when I say that we are a risk-based organization, this is really what drives us. We run a best-in-class, intelligence-led, risk-based global security program. Our threat condition framework assigns each property a posture aligned to its environment. And I'll go into that here in a second. Hotels undergo routine audits and our standards evolve as the threats shift. Most importantly, the program creates a shared language across brands, geographies, owners, and internal stakeholders, ensuring that we're consistent and data-driven. This image to the left is kind of a snapshot of our hotels around the world based on their risk level. So green is low, yellow is medium, orange is high, and red is critical. As the threats increase, our posture escalates. Nothing is removed, only added. So we operate at 4 tiers: low, medium, high, and critical. Each tier adds countermeasures. So, and we never remove them unless they drop back down on the spectrum. So at high, for example, we add enhanced patrols, dedicated staffing entrances, and surveillance detection. At critical, we then layer in metal detectors, X-ray machines, vehicle inspections, and penetration testing. The framework creates agility without sacrificing consistency. So the question may be, how do you arrive at these risk levels, at these designations? It's fairly straightforward, but it's a lot of administration. If we assume, and I like to assume this, the formula for risk is threat times vulnerability. I know there are loads of various formulas out there. I like it because it's easy to remember and it tends to work. That simply means then we need to understand our vulnerabilities at the ground level and the threats that surround them. So every property gets a threat condition report sent to them, and they're fairly easy to complete. They're written for the lowest common denominator, just given cultural and education levels. They then complete this. We then receive it. We review it for accuracy. Sometimes we go back and forth with the property to make sure it's done correctly. That then results in a vulnerability rating. Now we need to know what the threats are around them. Well, fortunately, we have threat data down to 500 meter squares around the entire globe. That results in a threat rating. And then the combination of the two results in a risk rating. We review the risk ratings at all of our properties on a quarterly basis, and we adjust up or down based on how those how that final score is detected. But it isn't all about terrorism. We face every risk, oftentimes at the same time. For example, in 2025 alone, we tracked over 1,500 demonstrations near or at our properties, from political protest to social activism. And this counted for nearly half of all threats at our properties worldwide. So a huge growth there. We also manage risk association with things like extreme weather, sensitive group bookings, inspired extremism, and reputational events. And crises rarely come one at a time. They usually overlap and cascade in time and place. So that's why our plans integrate security, business continuity, operations, and communications into one cohesive playbook. At our scale, structure isn't optional. It really is the backbone of consistency. We operate on a strategy we call the rule of 3. So that's 3 lines of defense at the property level, the global safety and security level, so our corporate level, and then with auditors and regulators. We can prescribe as much as we want, but if people aren't actually following the playbook, it's nothing more than a good idea. So that's where our auditors and regulators come into play. We have 3 teams that deliver support. We have a group within the US and Canada. We have international operations, and then we have operational support. Those are the 3 key areas within global safety and security. And then we have 3 pillars: safety, security, and crisis management, which is then unified by intelligence, investigations, and executive protection. This structure ensures clarity, accountability, and consistency and alignment across our global portfolio. Data is how we scale from 1 hotel to 10,000. As you know, we can only manage what we can measure. So metric-driven KPIs let us deliver objective, globally consistent security standards. Data removes subjectivity, removing anecdotes and feelings from prioritization. Yes, we could probably tell a lot of great war stories, but if it's not backed by data, in my opinion, it's not terribly helpful. But if we can provide some stories to support the data, well, then we can provide some context, and we can communicate that to a broader audience. So we like to have a little bit of both, but make no mistake, the foundation of this is the data. For example, I have a dashboard that I can pull up at any time, and I can see the total number of incidents globally, per region, per property, whatever it is, the type, the severity, the impact, the time and place in which it nearly occurred or it did occur at our nearly 10,000 properties around the world. And then we can just use charts or visualizations to translate security into the language of the business. This enables leadership to make informed, risk-driven, and adjusted decisions. So some of the KPIs, for example, incident rates per occupied room, time to detect, time to recover, audits completed, audit scores, training completion. These are just some of the KPIs that we use to measure success. This is kind of a security technology seminar, so I'd be remiss if I at least didn't address it. Security tools improve accuracy and enhance our scalability. We are just now seeing, and I think I could say this across most industries, edge analytics, for example, that were promised to us 20 years ago. I thought we would see them much sooner, but I think they're just now coming online where they're really useful. So for example, cameras and video management systems which can discern animals from humans, count product and people, use facial recognition, look for anomalies and detect heat signatures before there's even a wisp of smoke. We're starting to see video management systems which can detect and triage unsafe behavior, which is pretty cool. We're not too far off, I think, from a time when cameras will detect and triage a vast array of security incidents. Right now, it requires quite a bit of computing on-premises computing power, but I think there will be a time in the not too distant future where not so much of that will be required. Access control systems are increasingly autonomous, integrating with video management and intrusion detection systems. Intrusion detection systems are improving with more creative applications and fewer false positives. It used to be that alarms, if they were set without any sort of regular human interaction, we've got a lot of false positives. Seeing less and less of that these days. And then the less complex technologies, what we used to call the guns, guards, and gates, they're being used in smarter ways, I think, backed by data, not by emotion. We're increasingly avoiding solutions which are emotionally sold by vendors and not backed by data. Now, since we have more and more data, I think we're just able to call them out a little bit more and make smarter decisions. Intelligence. It really only matters when it changes decisions, and our operations center ensures that it does. So, for example, we have 1 mile geofences created around all of our properties worldwide. So anything remotely categorized as a threat that either touches or penetrates that geofence is captured by our GSOC. The GSOC tracks it. They look at tactical security incidents near those properties. They categorize them by severity, geography, and response. We merge quantitative dashboards with qualitative data so leaders feel the story behind the numbers. So these details we capture, and then we send the threat intel back out to the property level Sometimes they're aware of what's going on around them, sometimes they're not, but they always appreciate sort of having that almost that dome of coverage looking out for them. But as you can imagine, this results in a lot of noise. For example, we receive about 150,000 alerts per year. That's a lot of noise. From this, we sent out 2,974 alerts in 2025. So a lot of sifting going on there. And we can do something very similar for our travelers too. We can set up geofences around them when they're traveling and then monitor while they're on the road. So the core question we always try to ask is, are alerts actionable? Is it meaningful? If they don't change posture, staffing, or the guest communication, they're probably noise, and we try to remove as much of the noise as possible. I mentioned that we're also responsible for crisis management. It's not just about response, that's what you hear a lot about, but it really is about anticipation. The 5 categories of our crisis management framework are anticipate, prepare, prevent, respond, and recover. About 60% of our resources fall into the first 3 categories or left of boom. And of course, the theory here is the more we can deal with things on the front end, the less we have to worry about on the back end. We categorize events as either incidents, usually at the property level, kind of tactical level, emergencies or crises, regional and corporate level. So escalation and governance fits the moment. We conduct exercises at every level of the organization, the property, the region, the corporation, to build leaders who can adapt theoretical best practices to real world situations. And the goal here is fewer surprises, faster decisions, and better outcomes. Travel risk management, another big piece of our responsibility. Our duty of care really must enable travel whenever possible. Can't hinder it. We support more than 60,000 international trips by our associates every year. We provide situational awareness, timely advisories, and tools our travelers actually use. Oftentimes, it's trip reports. So if you want to get educated on what some of the biggest issues are where you're traveling to, great. We have some great products you can read while you're traveling or in preparation for your travel. If you simply want to check in while you're there, you can do that too. You're on our radar. We know you've hit the ground. We know where you are. And if you need help in extremis, of course, using our travel tracking app, you can hit a button and we can provide some help. Our recommendations must align with the business. They protect people while enabling mission critical travel. And as the world's largest travel company, our travel risk management responsibilities really need to reflect who we are as a company. And they extend to both our employees and our associates. And as you know, security is a team sport, and our partnerships expand the perimeter far beyond our walls. Our companies are incredibly competitive, but one of the things I really love about it is just how collaborative all the safety and security people are across brands. We're looking out for each other because we realize today I may be targeted, but tomorrow you might be, and vice versa. Marriott plays a very active role in the global security ecosystem. We're active participants in the Overseas Security Advisory Council, the Domestic Security Alliance Council, the International Security Management Association, ASIS International, AIRIP, which is a group for intel analysts. And then we have our area, regional, and sector-specific networks. These relationships strengthen our intelligence picture, accelerate best practice adoption, and enhance public-private coordination worldwide. And maybe you're participating in this because you agree with me that security leadership requires continuous learning, intellectually, professionally, and operationally. We were just skimming the wave tops here, but if you found any of this remotely interesting, here are just a few resources I regularly recommend. First on the left, Anti-Fragile by Nick Taleb. Really changed my perception of resilience and risk management, came out in 2012. We all know what resilience is. A good definition for that is being stressed beyond current state and then snapping back to current state as quickly and effortlessly as possible. But what if we could snap back and be a little bit stronger, say plus 10 or 15%, maybe similar to the human body. You go to the gym, you beat yourself up, maybe take yourself right to the edge of being injured. You come back the next you've recovered. For me, it's a little bit more than a day. Your bones are a little denser, your muscles are a little stronger, and you can take to place that within most of our when it matters. Crisis. So if you're involved in crisis management, emergency management at all, I'd be surprised if you haven't already read this. For a very broad audience, everybody from children of our senior executives to even members on our team, The Gift of Fear by Gavin DeBecker. The premise of this is, as we have evolved as humans, we've allowed our egos to overtake our intellect, and we're not listening to that little voice in the back of our head enough, which is a product of evolution. It's a gift saying, this doesn't feel right, doesn't seem right, it might be dangerous. This book encourages us all to listen to that gift a little bit more. If you're interested in our story, this is a pretty good book. Success is Never Final. Really covers the career of Bill Marriott, our founder's son, who was really instrumental in really the go-go years of Marriott, where we had global expansion. And if you're interested in just some really good business products, and if you're a podcaster, I found that Founders and Acquirers is outstanding. It covers some of the most influential, successful, and innovative business leaders in recent history. So this is just a start. I always make the offer, if you found this interesting, if you're part of another, maybe a larger work group, and if I'm available, I'm happy to share as much or as little of this presentation with you and your group as possible. So I'll stop there, just in case we have any questions or comments.
Thank you so much. That is awesome. It was a great presentation. I just want to mention to all of our attendees that there'll be a post-event email sent out, and all of these books will be included in that. So don't worry about scrambling to write it down. We will get that information to you. And Eric, I wanted to take the moderator's privilege of the first question. And just to remind everyone, you could ask a question in the Q&A box down below. But I came originally from the terrorism prevention space, so I don't want to throw you under the bus with this question here. But I'm wondering, how do you know when the technologies that you are working with are working or are preventative in keeping, your location safe?
Mm. Well, of course, they have to be functional, right? So they have to actually work. That is as intuitive as that sounds. You guys know sometimes things just don't work as advertised. I keep coming back to standards. Technical standards are really one of three massive products that we keep relying on. We have department standards, operational standards, and technical standards. So number one, those technologies need to align with existing standards. And this speaks to the scale that we have too. We don't want properties just going out and buying the cheapest thing on the market. We want them to stay with our standards. So what does the standard say? How does the standard really convey what right looks like? We use that as our benchmark and also our maturity model. So if at the property level, things are operating as they're outlined within the standard, great, we're good to go. If not, how can we fix it? And how can we possibly replace some of those technologies? And I also say, whenever we talk about technology, there's always this tendency to just think about the complex technologies. Let's never forget, really, technology, another word for technology is tool. That's all it is. I mean, a shovel is a tool, is technology. So never overlook the less complex technologies as well. Sometimes the simpler systems are the best ones, and they are certainly some of the less expensive over the long haul. I hope that answers your question, sort of, Courtney.
I am muted. Yeah, it does. We have one more quick question that I'm going to ask you. So you guys have a lot of systems in place to monitor the properties. So what systems are in place to protect the executives and staff?
Yeah. Well, certainly what I always try to think of is like the big AWACS that's flying over the globe and taking everything in, really starts with intelligence for us. Again, getting back to anticipate, prepare, prevent. Um, and it's not just enough to say that you're subscribing to a bunch of intelligence platforms. It tends to be a lot of noise. Nothing beats a trusted in-house professional. We are so fortunate in that we have full-time employees running our intelligence program here. So that means they understand the culture. They understand a little bit of the long-term strategy. So they're thinking of second and third order effects and how they might affect the company. And then they take all of this information and really convert it into, so what? Okay, we know a lot of bad things are happening around the world, but how does that really affect us as an organization versus just the industry writ large or just the private sector writ large? So it really does start with intelligence. And you mentioned executives. Executive protection is white hot right now, given since really the murder of Brian Thompson in December of 2024. Um, Protective intelligence for executives, very different from standard intelligence, where we're actively monitoring threat actors, people who have either demonstrated or are likely to, um, you know, cause disruption with our senior executives. We're very fortunate we have protective intelligence capabilities as well.
Well, thank you, Eric. I know that there's a few questions we haven't gotten to yet, and I'll make sure to share these with all of our speakers afterwards to see if they have any resources that can be included in the post-event email so that we can get you answers to those. Thank you again, Eric. That was a great presentation. We were so glad to have you. But up next, I am going to introduce Phil Coppola. So Phil currently serves as the Business Development Director for Mobile Solutions at PAX North America. At HID, Phil plays a role in driving growth and expanding market presence. And as an active content creator, and you see a mobile evangelist, Phil has amassed a following on LinkedIn of over 10,000 followers. He is also the author of the Inside Track newsletter, a publication on LinkedIn that covers the latest trends, industry news, and best practices in the field of mobile credential and physical access control systems. His LinkedIn will be shared with you so that you can check it out. Take it away, Phil.
Awesome. And what a fantastic introduction. Hello, my name is Phil Coppola. I am the mobile evangelist at HID. And as Courtney mentioned, I am the Director of End User Business Development for HID Physical Access Control Systems North America, which is a very long title to be looking at on a business card, hence mobile evangelist, because my job is to get out there and spread the good word as it pertains to all things mobile. Today, I want to talk to you about and kind of piggybacking on what Eric was just talking about operational efficiency. There was a little bit on one of his slides that talked about access control as it pertains to automation, and really that's if I could have picked a better title for this presentation today, I probably would have picked that one. How mobile access automates the processing of identities across multiple systems or from plastic to platform. Um, Before I jump into this deck, a couple of things. Number one, you see a QR code on your screen. If you're watching this on LinkedIn, make sure you connect with me. If you're not watching this on LinkedIn, scan that QR code, connect with me on LinkedIn, where I share all sorts of content about HID mobile access and our solutions beyond mobile as well. But I want to just convey sort of a little bit of a story here. I want you to think about your daily life and where your identity resides for you. For me, I can tell you that everything in my life revolves around my phone, to the point where if I leave my house without my phone, I feel a bit naked and afraid. I do have my watch, but at the end of the day, I need my phone. And why is that? Well, my house key is on my phone. My car key is on my phone. When I live in New Jersey, I oftentimes commute to New York City. I take mass transit. I pay for my NJ transit tickets on my phone and I show a QR code to the conductor. When I leave Penn Station and I get on the New York City subway, I tap my phone at the payment terminal. When I go to Starbucks or my local coffee shop, I'm typically using Apple Pay to pay for my coffee. And then I get to an office, and then I got to do one of these. Where's my card? The office space is literally the last place on this planet where you still have to pull out a piece of plastic. And for resorts and casinos who operate some of the most secure, technologically advanced environments in the world, still are managing identity on a piece of plastic. Today, I want to talk to you about why that's changing. So, with that, let's dive right in. So, first of all, I wanted to highlight, as Eric did, some of the realities of the resort and casino operations space. Obviously, to his point, you're dealing with a huge staffing operation. Okay. You also are dealing with lots of contractors, seasonal staff, and lots of transient staff, people that are making deliveries on a fairly routine basis, people that are working on HVAC, people that are working on construction projects all throughout the facility that don't necessarily belong to your organization, but may need to be credentialed and ultimately identified on your property. It sort of reminds me of a funny video I saw on Instagram the other day where a bunch of kids basically said, you know, we hear that if you just carry a ladder and wear a reflective vest, you could just pretty much get in anywhere. And sure enough, they were able to get into some pretty interesting spaces just because they looked like they belonged. How do we validate and verify identity in a world like that? You're also dealing with high turnover, where whenever we have environments with lots of staff, especially as Eric mentioned, staff that are not, the highest paid folks in the world, we're going to be dealing with high turnover. People come in and then they leave in pretty short order. And when we hand them a plastic card, what we're ultimately handing them is an ability to identify themselves. But when they no longer work for your organization, they can also still use that card to identify themselves as part of your staff, which can be a challenge. Of course, you all are protecting very high valued assets, not the least of which being people, but also in a casino environment, there's lots of money being changed hands. And in the resorts world, you're dealing with very beautiful properties, motor vehicles, all sorts of stuff, right? And then ultimately, you're dealing with lots of regulatory compliance. Again, casinos and resorts are some of the most operationally complex environments in the world, yet we're still relying on badge systems that were designed decades ago to manage identity. Mobile access fundamentally changes how identity is issued, managed, and secured. So let's talk about what that looks like. And by the way, yes, the shirt says HID. Yes, the slides here say HID, but this information that I'm going to give you is told not just from an HID perspective, but everything I'm about to tell you is true for mobile access, whether it comes from HID or not. So I don't want you to get the sense of, oh, this guy's just trying to sell me HID mobile access. That would be nice. But what I'm trying to do is give you all the information that you need to make decisions to increase your operational efficiency for your organizations, whether that's with HID or not. So let's talk about badge issuance to digital provisioning. And let's use a real world example. You have a new hire. He's coming in for his first day of work. It's his first shift. And the first place we're sending him for his first shift is to the card office. Hey, do me a favor, sign this paperwork, go to the card office, get your picture taken, get your name printed on a card. You're going to deal with someone on our staff to do that. They're going to print that card. And then they're going to encode that card, get that data into your access control software, as well as any other systems that card data needs to, that card data relies upon in order to provision. Maybe it's for secure print, maybe it's for elevator control, maybe it's for commissary purposes, but we got to encode that card and get that card data into all sorts of other systems, and then ultimately provision that card. And in this instance, provisioning that card is printing it, encoding it, and then handing it to the person. It is at that point that is like the last point that we know that when we hand that card to that staff member, that they are the ones with the card. After that, everything else is an assumption. I assume that you still have that card. I assume that you use it properly. I assume that you didn't give it to someone else. And I assume that if you lose it, you're going to tell me about it pretty quick. And ultimately, by the way, they're going to lose it. At some point, they're going to be back in this card office saying, hey, I lost my card over the weekend and I need a new one. This creates a massive bottleneck, especially if you are a seasonal business that gets lots of staff during a certain period of the year. Maybe it's the summertime, maybe it's spring break, whenever it is, and you have this bottleneck of high traffic to your card office. This can represent a huge operational inefficiency. If we look at digital provisioning, in other words, taking that identity and provisioning it to a more trusted device in a much more automated way, what that looks like is very different. Your new hire starts, and you don't send them to a card office. All you do is say, hey, do me a favor. It's the night before your first shift. Go to this website, log in with your username and password to our internal business systems, and hit Add Pass. That pass is going to be added to your phone or your Apple Watch, Google Watch, Samsung Watch. And then when you come in, you're fully provisioned. It is in that moment where the pass hits their wallet or hits their app that they are completely provisioned across your entire infrastructure. The operational benefits here are huge. One, it's much faster onboarding. There's no more bottleneck. There's no more lines of people waiting to get a card or re-provisioning a card that they've lost 15 times. The credentialing process, the issuance process is completely remote, right? It can be done at home. It can be done in the parking lot. It can be done, in the middle of shifts. This reduces the badge office workload. We have lots of instances where facilities had 20,000, 30,000 card holders that were very seasonal, and they'd have to come through this office, thousands of people at a time, to now transitioning to a digital identity provisioning program and reducing their office footprint from a 2,000 square foot office staffed by 5 or 10 people to a facility that only takes up 150 square feet for the 1,000 or so people that refuse to put the credential on their phone or cannot have a credential on their phone, for example, if they go into secure areas and things of that nature. And of course, going back to an earlier statement, not only does the provisioning happen remotely, but the revocation also happens remotely. So when that person leaves your organization, perhaps they don't leave under the best of circumstances or in the best of terms, you can take that card off their phone immediately. So there is no chance of them coming back with a card that looks like they belong. Instead, that identity is completely removed and they no longer have access to your facility. Not only do they not have access, their phone doesn't even work on the readers anymore. Mobile ultimately transforms identity into software instead of a piece of plastic. Think about that statement as it pertains to your own personal life, where you have your credit card, perhaps in your Apple wallet like me, or a Google wallet, or a Samsung wallet. No longer do I have to worry, oh, did I bring that credit card with me? Or do I have to verbalize all 16 digits of that credit card number? No, it's software now. All I have to do is tap my phone and pay for things. And not only that, but from my computer, I can also use Apple Pay or Google Pay or Samsung Pay to pay for things on websites, even without having to ever enter my credit card number. That's the power of transitioning identity from a piece of plastic in this physical container to a digital transformation. And ultimately, like I was saying earlier, this is now a platform that is built entirely on trust and not based on assumptions and not based on hope. Like I said, I hand you that card, and it is at that point that I assume that you, the minimum wage employee that I'm hiring for a season, is going to follow all of my security best practices to the letter. And that is a failure of biblical proportions to make that assumption. But that is what we do today. Whereas a system that's built on trust has lots of mechanisms in place to ensure the proper usage of that identity. First and foremost, the credential data is stored on the secure element or secure enclave of the device itself. This is the same place that your credit card numbers are stored, your digital identity. I just loaded my passport into my Apple Wallet. My passport data is stored securely on that device. It is something that we trust. It is something that is used in practice every day and is way more secure than carrying a piece of plastic in your pocket. And of course, using NFC or near field communications really limits the range of the transmission of that credential, making it even more secure. Because we're relying on the security of the device itself, we can now leverage things like Face ID and Touch ID for multi-factor authentication at certain doors. You know what? At my front entrance or, the stock room, I just wanted people to tap their phone or their watch and get through that door. But I have an IDF closet. I have my GSOC room. I don't want just anybody gaining access to that. I want you to validate your identity. Traditionally, today, the way we would do that is card and PIN. So I give you a card, I assume you are who you say you are, and then I assume even more you are who you say you are because you put the PIN number in. But, 4-digit PIN number, 1234, plus a card, this still is based on an assumption. Here, with multi-factor authentication relying on Face ID or Touch ID, there's no faking your face. There's no faking your fingerprint. Is it possible? Yes, far less likely than somebody taking a card and knowing that what their combination is to the PIN code. So we have this native multi-factor authentication built in, and by the way, no PII risk to you. The communication is encrypted end to end from the phone to the reader. So even if somebody were to get in the middle of that traffic and listen, right, with some sort of a sniffer to that traffic, that transaction is only ever valid for that one interaction, and it's completely encrypted. So even if they could see it, all they see is a gobbledygook of 128 bits and strings of letters and numbers going between the phone and the device. That all happens in 200 milliseconds. By putting the identity and the credential data on the phone, this eliminates card sharing. There is no more card sharing. My favorite example of this is somebody saying, "Oh, you know what? I'm a guest here, but I need to use the restroom. Can I borrow your card to go to the restroom?" Or what I've seen actually happen in the real world is, "Hey, I need to use the restroom. Yeah, here's my card. Go use that door and go to the restroom." You don't know who I am or what I'm trying to do, but I'm going through that door with your credential data. And that's a violation on many levels, but it happens every day because people are just trying to be nice. It's like anti-tailgating. We tell people not to tailgate, we tell people not to hold the door, but at the end of the day, people are still going to hold the door because people want to be nice. This eliminates that because nobody ever said, "Hey, do me a favor. I need to go to the bathroom. Can I borrow your phone?" It doesn't happen. And then finally, this completely eliminates card cloning. A lot of organizations are still using technology based on, or card technology based on radio frequency technology from the 1990s, right? And that's easily clonable, or technology from the early 2000s that is vulnerable to cloning. With a mobile credential, because of all this encryption and because of where it's stored and all that jazz, we completely eliminate the possibility of credential cloning. Um, yeah, ultimately, mobile credentials are protected by the same security architecture that banks and financial institutions use to protect digital payments. So if it's good enough for the banks and it's good enough to secure your financial information, it's certainly good enough for the identity of your staff and of your contractors. Now, that also means the era of lost cards is over. Okay. Um, we know the industry average is 17%. 17% of people will lose their cards annually. So to put that into plain terms, if you have a staff of 100 people, 17 of them will lose their card this year. At minimum, oftentimes the larger the organization, that number actually climbs much higher. If you have 10,000 employees, that number doesn't change. It's your 1,700 people are going to come in through your card office and ask for a card at some point during the year. That's several times a day you're dealing with this. That is not efficient. It's not a good use of anybody's time. And with a mobile credential, that simply goes away. There's no more badge reprinting because there's no more badges. The credential again is instantly revoked in the moment that that person leaves your organization, and in an automated way, they get removed from the HR database. Their card is gone. There's no like, oh, somebody remember to go to the access control system and remove their card number. No, as soon as they're deprovisioned in your HR system, they're completely removed and the card is pulled off their phone. The reprovisioning to a new device is also just as easy. Hey, I went from an iPhone 14 to an iPhone 17. Great. Just log into that same website that you used to get your initial card, log in, hit add pass, and you're done. That person is fully provisioned in under 30 seconds, never had to call your office, never had to go visit anybody, and all their credential data gets into the systems that they're supposed to in a fully automated way. Obviously, this is going to help to reduce your operational costs quite a bit and improve your security. Let's call it what it is. You know, I'm a PSP, I'm a nerd for this type of stuff. Every time a card is lost, that is risk. You don't know who's going to pick up that card and do something. If we can eliminate that risk or reduce that risk to only specific individuals that have cards, we can really reduce our risk profile and ultimately tighten up a vulnerability that we all have. And again, it is more than just a credential. Once the identity transitions to the phone, it becomes a platform. And that platform supports security. It supports employee experience because again, think about your day to day. The minute I have to reach into my wallet to grab a card, I think we've all lost a little bit of something. I know my ego hurts when I have to reach into my wallet to grab a card, but it also transitions this to be a platform for enhanced operational security and operational efficiency. Mobile access is a better way of managing identity at the end of the day. It works across multiple systems automatically and leverages a tool that literally everyone has in their pocket. And for casinos and resorts, mobile credentials aren't just about replacing badges. They're about modernizing how identity works across the entire property. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it. There's my QR code. Please scan that and connect with me on LinkedIn. And just one last word from me before we get into Q&A and I pass the torch. If you remember nothing else, mobile credentials don't just replace plastic badges. We're not just taking a piece of plastic and putting it on your phone. The intention here is to transform identity into a digital service that's faster, more secure, and easier to manage. Now I'm done.
Thank you so much, Phil. That was great. I would love if you could just touch really quickly a little bit on how casinos and hotels and how they're modernizing identity and credential management to maintain strong security while keeping operations running smooth.
Yeah, absolutely. So this goes back to what I was talking about in terms of automation. You know, I'm a big fan of the platform Reddit. I really recommend everybody here, if you're an access control nerd like me, go follow the access control subreddit. Eric was chatting about his GSOC, and it's well staffed, and they've got lots of people, and that's fantastic. That's what everybody should have. But the reality is, based on some comments in some communities on Reddit, what I understand is that is not the norm. The norm is if they do have a GSOC, it's very limited in staff. It's 2 or 3 people managing an operation with thousands of card holders, thousands of doors, hundreds or thousands of cameras, and they're just, you know, they're stretched to their limit. They're spread very, very thin. And the common thing that we hear over and over again is more automation. You know, Eric had mentioned, and I think he's 100% spot on, automation on the video surveillance side, and that's getting way, way better with advancements in artificial intelligence. But there's no way to AI our way out of credential management, credential issuance. The best way to do that is to fully automate that process and tie it into systems that are already present on site. Most organizations are going to have some sort of identity store, whether that's Active Directory or Okta or Entra. And that can be the linchpin to the entire operation. There are now lots of integrations for mobile access with platforms like ServiceNow. So you create a new hire, you enter a ServiceNow ticket and say, issue this person a mobile credential. And that whole automation happens in the background. The card numbers get created, they get distributed across all the systems that they need to, and then the person simply needs to go to their phone and tap a link in an email. That's what we're talking about in terms of automation. So now we can be operationally more capable to focus on the things that, really need urgent attention when we have incidents with guests or incidents, on site, potentially terrorist attacks. We don't want to have to worry about, oh, hold on, there's a fire going on, but Billy forgot his card. That's a problem. We can automate that away to give better operational capabilities to the folks that are managing those GSOCs, especially when they're spread thin.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And so you're talking about this kind of automation, but I think some people see that the industry might be siloed between IT, security, operations. So what are some of the benefits that you've seen for marrying these type of like physical and cybersecurity technologies?
One of the biggest challenges that any project has getting off the ground for mobile access is early stakeholder adoption at the IT level. In other words, bringing the IT department in as soon and as early as possible, because a digital identity program, let's think about it in physical security terms. I'm a former Genetech guy. I used to help people manage their Genetech access control systems. Oftentimes, 99 times out of 100, you've got your access control head-end software that has a database of users, and the IT department in parallel has an identity store that contains literally the same people, but a completely different database. And so they're managing that system, you're managing this system, and you hope at the end of the day they kind of match up. And oh, by the way, Billy was fired last week. Can somebody get him out of the access control system? Yeah, 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 I'll get to it. And then they never get to it. And then the access control database blows up. And I'm sure there are people on this call doing this. Yep, I live and breathe that every day. When you involve the IT department and say, hey, you've got this database, I've got this database. What if we combine them together? You're also managing, Mr. or Mrs. IT director, the identity store, the human resources software, the Salesforce integrations, the HVAC integrate. You're managing all of these integrations, and the one thing that all of these people interact with, you don't. Okay, let's change that paradigm and let's bring the IT department into these conversations. You'd be surprised when you talk about reducing risk and providing better operational efficiency to the IT directors, they go, yeah, no brainer. We tend to look at it and say, oh man, this is a cost center. It gets very expensive. I'm always fighting for budget. You go to the IT folks, uh, they have quite a different take on this, and there's almost no budget too high for them. Believe it or not, this solves so many problems for them. And the last thing I'll say about the IT folks, I want you to think about this. And like I said earlier, a lot of the technology that we have deployed out in the field is legacy. And oftentimes they're antiques. The average age of a piece of access control hardware is 15 years, which means if you put a reader on the wall 15 years ago, you're using a 15-year-old piece of technology to protect people in 2026. What other piece of security technology from an IT perspective do we have deployed that is 15 years old? Zero. It is the equivalent of allowing you to use password as your password. It doesn't happen. And so why do we allow this to happen in physical security? Well, it's hard to get the budgets approved and blah, blah, blah. So if we could bring the IT departments in early and ask them to help us automate things, you tend to see a lot less resistance.
And that makes a lot of sense to me. I hope everyone listening can go back to their IT departments and have a chat. Thank you so much, Phil. This
My
was
pleasure.
a great presentation. Very happy to have you. And I think we're going to move on to our last speaker of the day.
Wonderful. Thank you.
So we're moving on to our last speaker. Eddie Collier serves as the Executive Director of Corporate Surveillance Technology for MGM Resorts International, where he leads the strategy, design, and deployment of advanced surveillance and security technologies across the company's global portfolio of integrated resorts. He oversees enterprise scale initiatives spanning next generation video surveillance platforms, AI driven analytics, emerging sensor technologies, and large scale infrastructure modernization. Eddie began his career in the CCTV industry in 2001, founded his own camera integration business by 2003, and joined MGM Myridge in 2005. In 2008, he played a key role in the design and implementation of surveillance systems for the $9 billion city center development in Las Vegas. Eddie works closely with technology partners and advisory boards to advance surveillance innovation across the gaming and hospitality industries. He's been featured on Discovery Channel, National Geographic, and Destination America, and frequently speaks at industry conferences, including ISC West, on emerging technologies and the future of surveillance. So thank you for being here with us today, Eddie.
Courtney, thank you so much for the introduction. Usually I would say, that's great. We saved the best for last, but I am having internet issues, so I'm going to be staying off of camera. Is this presenting correctly?
Yes, we can hear and see you clearly, or see your screen clearly.
Perfect. So I'm going to be talking about emerging technology, and with that being LiDAR. But to go back a little history of this, I've been in this industry over 20 years, and with MGM Resorts over 20 years. And this goes all the way back, I mean, we had analog cameras with VCRs, but when we started bringing AI into our environment, even with analog technology, we brought LiDAR or LPR systems, again, 20 years ago. And then that evolved to 360 cameras. So, which, situational awareness. And then we've evolved, almost a decade ago now to facial recognition that works very well, and we're very successful with it. And now moving into some really cool technology, LiDAR, right? This technology uses lasers to actually identify moving objects and get situational awareness, but with anonymized data. So, which is really important when it comes to compliance and things we're doing within the casino environments, right? Not just using camera technology. So LiDAR has been around since, the 60s, military use cases, satellite tracking, topographical mapping, it's, moon surface mapping, terrain surveys and construction. Most of you guys have seen this now, the self-driving cars. Tesla uses cameras because they're cheaper. LiDAR is still very expensive. But for the fully autonomized vehicles, you'll see the LiDAR sensors hanging off or on top. And now we're moving into, what for us, casino environment, but hotel spaces, again, to get all kinds of data. And this is what I really love. So we're going to be using it for, I have a plethora of use cases, but again, not just security, which security is a big one for us, but crowd density, dwell times, traffic flows, parking, valet utilization to the front when you pull into our casino environments. But some of the perimeter focus is these virtual fencing environments. So imagine LiDAR being set up. So these sensors are just gathering data, but they're able to let you know if there's an intrusion, right? In an exclusion zone that you set. But now you can follow the path of this person, right? Or object, any object, through any given area that you have mapped out. So, and I love to show. And so again, this isn't just something that, it's just pie in the sky on canned stuff. We actually installed this, and we're installing a big installation right now, which I'm going to show you guys a little bit of that. But One thing these sensors do much better than cameras is stitch the data together from one device to the next. Where cameras are lacking today, if I have camera coverage of an area and I observe a person walk into that camera field of view, and then you go to the next camera, I have to manually track that. It's hard for cameras to do the cross-camera tracking today. It's coming. We've seen some instances of it, but it's not great. LiDAR does this almost perfectly from one sensor to the next, right? Hands off, and I can identify everywhere that moving object has gone. So low lighting, not an issue, right? A longer range. These sensors can go, over 400 meters, and again, it's all tailored on what you're looking at. So from 30 meters up to 400 in most cases. No privacy issues, right? The anonymized data point is really big for us, and it's a more reliable technology. So again, very accurate. So I want to show you some real life testing that we've done. And what I'm going to be showing you here on the left is the LiDAR sensor. That's the data coming from the sensors. It's a 2D map. The green dots are representing the moving objects. And on the right is actually video coverage just to show you what actually happened. So this was for us just to verify the data. So you're going to see these dots moving around, and here are the people around the slot machine. You're going to see the person tending to the trash walk to the restroom. And what we had on our dashboard, which I'll get to that later, we had actual running counts of occupancy in these areas. Here's this gentleman here. Here's this green dot here on the left. He's going to try to use the women's restroom on accident. So this was just to represent, this is an area that was not very busy for us to identify how accurate these LiDAR sensors were. So now moving on to a busier area. This area is a much busier area in the casino, utilizing multiple LiDAR sensors. So you see all these moving dots. And what we wanted to identify was people utilizing these slot machines. See these three gentlemen walking in the back, the backpacks? Right above on the map, you see those three dots. Just to show you it's live. So what we wanted to observe here, right, is just flow patterns. So we know when people put money in slot machines, but we don't know how many people actually walk by, right? So now imagine being able to get this data for the entire casino or any environment to identify where those, heavy traffic patterns are, and then what's actually happening. So what we were able to observe is people sitting on that slot machine that were never playing it. So it was just utilizing that chair because it's the only chair in the vicinity next to the elevator banks. So they were waiting for friends or spouses. So again, just great data that we were able to share with our casino team to say, hey, this might not be an ideal location for these machines, right? They thought it was because it is a very busy area, but it's not. All right, so another scenario here. So this goes and leans more into the security realm. So this was anomaly detection. And one of those anomalies for us is fast moving objects. So if you go running through the casino, right, that's unusual. So what you're going to see here, you're going to see someone break the threshold of speed and you'll get that red halo around you. And that red halo stays with you until we acknowledge that you're not a threat. So imagine someone taking off, you're approached by security, you take off running, and then you run to the casino and you go sit down on a table and act like you're just a regular guest. We would be able to identify where you went and actually where you are, so we could direct security right to your location. All right, so virtual fencing. So this is a big one for us. So we have a lot of real estate, a lot of spaces where camera coverage is not very, very good. It's limited, right? So what we've done is we've installed some LiDAR sensors to get these vast areas, right, and created virtual fences. So there's not a physical fence there, there's just a virtual fence. And if a human passes this virtual fencing area, right, we get automatic alarming, and then we actually have autonomous camera tracking. So our cameras are integrated with the system to pull up, show us what's actually happening, and then follow that moving object until, again, we can acknowledge that you're not a threat, or we respond to the incident. So this is just to show you what the LiDAR sensor is actually seeing. So there's a lot of data coming from those sensors. And again, this isn't something that we monitor live. This is just representing all the moving objects within a high density area. So, and another example in parking. So this was just a sensor in an outdoor location observing a parking lot, so we can see cars, dwell times, how long they've been there. And something we're looking for are traffic patterns and identifying specific patterns that we've given to the system to learn. And one of those for us is, we call it door puller, but it's just an individual that would walk through a parking area and approach a vehicle, check the door to see if it's unlocked, and then he moves to another vehicle to see if that door's unlocked. So that behavior, right, we're monitoring to see if a person is actually observed doing this. And you can do it with the LiDAR very well because you can see the person walking from vehicle to vehicle. All right, and this is where it gets really cool. So this is where the anonymized data comes in handy, where we're going to be giving this data to every vertical, right? I'm a cost center, being in security and surveillance, right? We cost the company a lot of money, but we try to find ways to monetize what we do. And that one of the ways is going out to all the different verticals and getting them to use this data. So we're going to be creating custom dashboards for every different area. So imagine the front desk, right? We'll be able to give the front desk team a login. And again, this goes back to Eric and his team with Marriott. We're a big partner with Marriott. I love Marriott, by the way, Eric. And what we do here is that registration team logs in. They can see current people that are out front in the registration line, in the queuing line itself. If that queuing line exceeds a threshold, we can get a mobile pop-up. So the management team can actually get an alert and say, hey, we need to get more staff up there, right? Because we're exceeding our thresholds. And then historically, they can go back in time and identify anything that's happened. You can look, you can get granular enough to see every registration desk. So let's just say 8 to 4 in the morning or 8 to 4 in the afternoon, Monday through Friday. What did registration desk check in verse 5? And you can get all that data on a weekly basis, monthly, whatever you'd like to see. So another thing that we're doing is integrating our data. You see the dashboard data on the right. Again, more forward facing, presenting this to our guests, right? When they can log in and they can see, hey, what is the occupancy of any given area, right? How busy is that restaurant? If I want to go to the gym, how many treadmills are currently open? So, and then here are some of the dashboards, that you can go back and historically, look and then even forecast for, future use cases. So another thing LiDAR does really well is it's not obstructed, right? By what we said, light, lighting doesn't affect it, but smog or smoke and, the fog from the fountain show at nighttime. Right, you can see here with the camera, you see there is a person there. You see his shoe, but you can't see his body very well. And with the LiDAR system, you can see that there is a person there. There's an outline, and so it can identify people or objects even through, dust and smoke scenarios. And here's just another example. This was one on a street, street corner. This is at nighttime. It was pitch black, just showing you what the sensor can actually see. And then here's just an example of the size. So about 3.5-inch diameter, and they're even smaller now. They're down to under 2 inches for 360-degree LiDAR field of view. So with that, I'm going to throw it back to you, Courtney, for any questions.
Hi, yeah, this has been really interesting. I think it's really cool, great case study to see where this technology can be applied. And I want to ask you, as LiDAR and sensor fusion continue to evolve, Where do you see this technology having the biggest impact in large scale environments? So do you see it in resorts or stadiums or smart cities, over the next 5 to 10 years?
I see it everywhere. And a really unique use case is the autonomous vehicles, right? So I'm sure some of you have seen, the Zooks or the different cars that are running around town, but all of those are collecting LiDAR data all over our city. They're mapping out those areas and then creating real life zones. So when those cars come around, they're grabbing that data and they're sharing it back to a dashboard. So again, those are going to be integrated, I think, with citywide LiDAR installations that are going to be able to monitor moving objects and activity all the time. And again, with the privacy, aspect in mind, because it's not a camera. We're not identifying exactly who you are until you pass through a camera, right? And then we couple those two data streams together. But again, I see it being used everywhere. At the stadiums is another great example where you need to understand traffic flows, patterns, timing, right? What do those concessions look like, during intermissions? So all of that, right, can be on a dashboard for someone to respond and act. So your experience is better. And that's our goal here is not just for security to keep you safer in our casino environments, but to hopefully better your experience, right? Bring those wait times down. And when you go to check in at registration, or when you're going to go try to find something you want to do within the casino environment, right?
Yeah, that makes sense. And we have a participant that has been looking into LiDAR for dark drone threats in a downtown convention space. And he's asking, given the ceiling height restrictions, do you find the square footage FOV of the sensor a challenge?
No. So there is a sensor for every scenario. So again, we're installing some 400-meter sensors and we're installing some 30-meter sensors. And then there's different installation pieces to make these very discreet. So again, if you go looking through a casino environment, you'll probably notice a lot of AV equipment, fire equipment. So, things you don't even realize are there, you wouldn't even recognize. And most people don't even notice our cameras. We do a pretty good job of blending them in, but again, there's cameras everywhere, right? So
And I think before you talked on integration, and you talked about autonomous tracking and real-time analytics, can you explain a little bit more how important the integration between LiDAR, AI, and existing surveillance platforms is to make these systems the most useful that they could be?
yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. It's so beneficial, right, to have this data for us to go back and look and then hopefully, be better, right, to do better. But when you integrate it with your VMS solution, and we use MirrorSys today, we we are integrating these two data streams so that way we can couple the data, right? When an incident happens within LiDAR, that anomaly is detected, our cameras pop up instantaneously, right? They let us know, hey, there's an issue here. You need to, look at it. So those integrations, I think, are going to be very useful, for us to respond quickly to these incidents, and even for the areas like hotel registration, or the casino team. It'd be nice to understand, not just traffic patterns, but when those alerts come up, they can get a visual on it to see if it really is an issue, if that queuing line did exceed that threshold, right? Or maybe someone went up there and they have some stuff, they move stanchions around and have something else going on. So
And then from an operational standpoint, what are some of the biggest challenges that organizations might face when moving from traditional camera-based systems to technologies like LiDAR or sensor-driven analytics?
well, I think with all technology and incorporating new tech into your environments, it's getting the infrastructure that's required. So like Phil said, we have lots of antidated, old 15-year-old technology, and that is true in some cases. And with that being said, the foundation of that probably needs to be looked at as well. So when we do these big technology advances, we look at the foundation, right? We ensure that our cable infrastructure is up to today's standards, and will be good for the next 50 years. At least that's our goal. So that way, when we put in this LiDAR sensor, even if I want to change it tomorrow, it might not be a LiDAR sensor. Maybe it is a camera with integrated LiDAR that might suit us better. I can just replace it. It would be easy. But again, it's getting that infrastructure in place so that way you can do anything you need to in the future.
And what are some of the limitations that you experienced working with LiDAR?
Some of the big limitations are again, it's a heavy bandwidth ask and devices on the edge, and it's expensive. So that's another limitation is funding. But other than that, I think you can design the LiDAR systems around any environment. You just have to be strategic about it, and again, you have to really plan these things out. So really understand the technology that you want to incorporate and then understand those use cases so that way you can develop it around those specific use cases you want to see.
And I like to end on a positive note, and I think you've showed us a lot of really awesome operational use cases where LiDAR could be really effective for people. So hopefully we've shown our audience that. And thank you so much for joining us. This was a very cool presentation, and I loved seeing all the interactive videos.
Yeah, no, I'm happy I was invited to it, so thank you. And it was very interesting hearing what Eric and Phil had to say and what they discussed. So
Great. Well, thank you to all of our speakers for sharing their expertise today, to our sponsors, HID, and to everyone who joined us. Thank you for staying on. Please take a moment to fill out our survey. The link has been posted in the chat, and you'll also get that after the webinar ends. And then please join us again at our upcoming symposiums. The next one will be on April 8th on stadium security, and then the one after will be on May 13th on K through 12 school security. So again, a post-event email will be sent out shortly that will include resources from our speakers, sponsors, contact information, and updates from SIA. So we hope to see you at ISE West in a few weeks, and we hope you'll join us for future events. Have a great rest of your day.